I've always said that a town this pretty couldn't possibly be as pure as it looks. The charm of those cobblestone streets and the way the church bells ring out so gently over the rooftops. It all paints a picture that's just a little too perfect. A place like this, it hides its flaws well, but deep down, I've always known the truth. People here like to believe that their secrets vanish into the dark corners of the church, tucked away in the silence between the pews. Or maybe they just can't bring themselves to look up at the crucifix and face what they've done. But I see them. I always have. Every little crack in their polished lives. It's all there if you know where to look. It all began with Grace Turner. That girl had one of those faces you couldn't forget. Bright smile, soft features. But her eyes? They told a different story. There was something in them, like a flicker of fire, a hint of the desires she carried around with her. It was subtle, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Grace had this way about her, like she was wearing her sins the same way someone might wear a favorite perfume. Lingering, noticeable, and impossible to ignore. She came to me once, maybe 3 weeks before everything unraveled. I remember it clearly because she looked so out of place. She walked into the confessional, all stiff and hesitant, like she thought the old wooden bench might burst into flames the moment she sat down. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. There was a tremble to it, like she was on the verge of tears, but there was something else too, something that didn't quite match the words she was saying. It was like she was going through the motions, saying what she thought she was supposed to say, but deep down, she didn't mean it, not one bit. You see, that was the thing about Grace, and about everyone else in this town, for that matter. They all wanted forgiveness, but none of them wanted to put in the work to earn it. She came to me hoping I could just sweep away her sins like they were dust on the floor, but deep down, I knew she wasn't ready to change. She didn't even want to try. I remember the way she talked about that boy, Jason Cole. Her voice softened when she said his name, like just speaking it brought her some kind of comfort. She said she loved him, that he was her whole world, and that she was planning to give herself to him completely. She called it love. But the marks I'd seen on her neck, they didn't look like love to me. And what kind of love plays out in the shadows of Lover's Lane, far away from the light? No, whatever they had, it wasn't the kind of love she wanted me to believe in. When Grace's body turned up, the whole town went into mourning. They cried in the pews, clinging to their rosaries like the beads could somehow string together enough hope to make everything right again. You should have seen them, heads bowed, voices trembling as they whispered their prayers, as if words alone could undo the terrible thing that had happened. Her hands, I'll never forget how perfect they looked in death. They were folded so neatly, like she was sleeping, with the rosary wrapped carefully around her fingers. That was my doing. I made sure of it. No matter what, Grace deserved that much, a little dignity even if it came too late. As for Jason Cole, he vanished just like that. No trace, no clues, no answers. The town searched high and low, combing through the woods and dredging the river, but it was no use. They never found him. And if you ask me, they never will. The others came later, Ethan Brooks and Logan Hayes. They thought they were being careful, but not careful enough. Ethan was the town's golden boy, the one everyone adored. Star quarterback, charming smile, the kind of kid who made every mother in the pews pray her own son might grow up to be just like him. Logan, though, he was different. Quiet, always keeping to himself, sketching away in that little notebook he carried everywhere. Most folks barely noticed him, but I did. One evening, I saw them. They were lingering too long in the shadows just outside the church, thinking they were safe, thinking no one was watching. Ethan leaned in and kissed Logan, his hands resting on Logan's shoulders like he didn't have a care in the world. They didn't know I was there, but I saw it. I always see these things. Not long after that, they came to me, or at least Logan did. He sat in the confessional, barely able to speak. "I don't think it's wrong, Father," he whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. "It feels like love." His hands were shaking, his eyes wet with tears, and guilt was written all over him, clear as day. But Ethan? No, he never stepped foot inside the confessional. He was too proud for that, too convinced he could hide whatever shame he carried beneath the shine of that Letterman jacket of his. When they found the boys out at Lover's Lane, it was like the town came unglued. The rosaries around their wrists were so tight they'd left bruises on the skin. The police muttered about hate crimes, their words heavy with unease. Meanwhile, the townsfolk had their own ideas. They whispered about perversion, about sin, about things they didn't understand but were quick to condemn. And Ethan's mother, my God, the way she cried during Mass. Her sobs were so loud, so raw, I thought the very walls of the church might crack under the weight of it. I sat beside her, holding her hand as she sobbed, and I told her what I always tell them: God has a plan. Whether or not she believed me, well, that wasn't my concern. After that came Sarah Peterson and Daniel Whitaker. I hadn't been expecting them, not at all. But you know how it is, temptation always has a way of creeping in, sliding into the corners of our lives when we least expect it. Sarah was a girl with a past that weighed heavy on her shoulders. No family to speak of, no steady job, and not much pride left to her name. She'd come to the church once before, stood at the edge of the sanctuary, looking small and unsure, and asked for money, for forgiveness, for everything but the one thing that mattered most. And then there was Daniel, the good, clean-cut politician with a shining reputation. A man everyone respected, or at least pretended to. But behind all that power, there was no discipline, no self-control. I found them together at Lover's Lane. Daniel had his hand on Sarah's knee, his wedding ring gleaming under the moonlight, and she was laughing, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp and bitter, the kind that says she knew exactly how little she mattered to him. I still remember the lipstick in her purse, a striking shade of red. When I saw the name printed on the tube, Sinners Die, I couldn't help but think how fitting it was. A truth laid bare for anyone willing to look. That's when the town really started to unravel. The whispers that had always lingered in the shadows began to grow louder, turning into full-blown rumors that spread like wildfire. Prayer meetings doubled overnight, and suspicion hung thick in the air. People locked their doors as soon as the sun set and crossed themselves every time they walked past the church, muttering prayers under their breath like talismans. But you know what's funny? It wasn't each other they should have feared. Not the neighbors they'd started eyeing with narrowed suspicion. No, it was never them. The next one to step into the tangled web was Detective Marcus Steele. He wasn't from here, straight out of Boston, and you could tell. He had that rough, no-nonsense way about him, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Marcus asked a lot of questions, always poking around where he didn't belong. He claimed he was just here to investigate, but I saw through him. I noticed the way he looked at Emma Wallace. Emma was a married woman, a teacher at the Catholic school, the kind everyone in town knew and respected. But respect doesn't mean much when you're hurting inside. She came to see me one evening, not in the confessional like the others, but in the quiet of the rectory, her voice barely steady as she spoke. "I feel trapped," she admitted, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "My husband doesn't love me anymore. Marcus? He makes me feel alive, like I haven't felt in years." I let her finish, and then I told her the truth. Simple, direct, and unshakable. Life isn't about feeling alive, Emma. It's about doing what's right. It's about being righteous. She didn't argue. She just sat there for a long moment, her eyes clouded with doubt, before nodding and walking out the door. She never came back after that. When Emma's time came, it was harder than I expected. There was something about her, something sacred, even in her imperfections. Arranging her body, making sure she looked peaceful. It weighed on me more than I care to admit. But sin is sin, and it had to be cleansed. As for Marcus, his role in all this wouldn't go unanswered. Maybe he wouldn't pay the ultimate price like the others, but his time would come. Whether through death or disgrace, he wouldn't escape judgment. The town turned on Marcus like a pack of wolves. What started as quiet murmurs in coffee shops and grocery aisles grew into a full-blown storm of accusations. Whispers swelled into shouts, and suspicion turned to condemnation. I played my part, speaking softly during my sermons, my voice calm but firm, like a shepherd guiding his flock. "Trust in God's judgment," I told them. He sees all, and in his time he will reveal the truth. And he did. The catacombs beneath the church are silent now, save for the occasional drip of water that echoes through the stone corridors. They've become a sanctuary of sorts, though not for the living. Ethan is here, his high school Letterman jacket long since faded, the fabric stiff with age. Logan is here, too, his notebook resting beside him, the pages smudged and worn. Sarah lies nearby, her crimson lipstick still tucked away in her purse. Daniel, Claire, all of them. Their faces are unrecognizable now, time having stolen what little remained of their identities. Even Ryan is here, tucked into a shadowed corner. His motorcycle leans against the wall beside him, its once shiny chrome dulled by rust and neglect. The paint flakes off in uneven patches, falling like dead leaves, and the tires are flat, deflated from years of abandonment. And I am here, too, sitting among them, my knife in hand. The blade catches the faint, flickering glow of candlelight as I run it against the whetstone. The sound steady and deliberate. It's a soothing rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, a prayer in its own way, a reminder that my purpose is clear, unshakable. They will come again. They always do. The sinners can't help themselves. They stumble into the darkness, thinking they'll find something there. But all they ever uncover is their own undoing. And when they come, I'll be here waiting, for the wages of sin is death. I've always known this to be true. I've always been his instrument.